Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. I am Nomiki Konst, just high on life today. Happy 420 to everyone. You know, today is the day that we have to remind each other why legalizing marijuana is a top project for progressives and should be a project for everybody. It is not some get out of my weed garden appeal by aging hippies and libertarian tech tokeheads. Drug prohibition has been one of the most racially unfair, destructive, and ultimately counterproductive policies in the nation's courted history of unfair, destructive, and counterproductive policies. Here is the very centrist Democratic governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam, during his State of the Commonwealth address earlier this year.
It's also time to acknowledge ways that our criminal justice system treats different people unfairly. Marijuana is a great example. We know that while white people and black people use marijuana at similar rates, black people are 3.5 times more likely to be charged with a crime for it. And they're almost 4 times as likely to be convicted. That happens because that's how the system was set up generations ago. In fact, one of the early leaders of the Federal Drug Enforcement Agency was clear that marijuana laws should be written explicitly to target people of color. And so they were. And they've been targeting people for years. It's time to join 16 other states and make marijuana legal and end the current system rooted in inequity.
Now, we are not stupid. Clearly, a big reason why this major step for racial equity is moving forward across the country is that there are powerful commercial interests tied into it and lined up behind it. Governor Northam himself went on to explain that marijuana would rival tobacco as a cash crop if only it were legal. He had to turn it into some sort of conversation about capitalism in order to favor it. He said the quiet thing out loud, Mr. Virginia. Cannabis capitalism will not turn out any better than big tobacco unless we make it so. So repealing marijuana prohibition is only the first step here. We need to expunge criminal records for marijuana offenses immediately. We need to get rid of the federal laws that still make marijuana possession criminal. Those are the federal laws that conflict with the state laws. We need to guarantee that communities of color have at least equal access to the business opportunities created by legalization. And wouldn't it be great if that was grouped into some sort of reparations bill, fair reparations bill? Better, let's make sure entrepreneurs and communities of color get disproportionate access through that reparations bill. It won't really make amends for what has gone down before, but it will help the future. And this is our next frontier on cannabis. Look at this map. 36 states. And that map up on screen right now. 36 states and the District of Columbia have now legalized marijuana in some fashion. You can see here, some places have approved just medical marijuana, okay? 16 states right now say recreational use is okay. In some places, a market is well established. Colorado has more marijuana dispensaries than Starbucks. So that's like the right priority for me at least. But other states, including recently Virginia and New York, have made cultivation, possession, and consumption legal without yet creating any legal marketplace to purchase marijuana. For New York alone, the estimate is that this will be a $5 billion business. So everyone is already trying to get a piece of that action. Lobbyists are popping up. They've been doing it for years, actually, pushing for this, gearing up, laying the groundwork, knowing that New York will inevitably legalize cannabis. California, though, is a cautionary tale of what can go wrong. An enormous gray market of unlicensed dispensaries have developed. There are monopolies pushing out smaller dispensaries. And many of these are in Black and brown neighborhoods. As progressives, we need to fight hard to make sure the profits of legal marijuana don't just go to big companies who have the lobbyists, as I mentioned, to make the rules, the way that they want, and then have the capital to push everybody else out. This should be our 420 resolve. Legalization is not enough. Fair distribution is essential. We have an excellent show today. Ben Dixon and Napoleon the Legend, who was playing that was the music that you were listening to. That was courtesy of Napoleon the Legend. We asked for it, and then he brought it so quickly. What an artist, man. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But before that, we have writer Amanda Chicago Ludis, who is going to share her reporting on cannabis around the country and what's happening right now with these illegal dispensaries that are selling legal marijuana, as well as other legalization efforts and how they're evolving around the country, the ones that we just mentioned. We'll be right back right after this break. I was just on the majority report and I looked down at my wrist and I saw that I had some sort of weird reaction on my wrist. And I'm saying this because I don't know if it was an allergic reaction. I went into the ocean the other day. I do not go into the ocean. That's a whole other story because I've once gotten sea lice. And guess what? I thought I had sea lice. And I thought, before I do that, before I freak out and take a Benadryl, I'm going to use some of my Sunset Lake CBD hemp salve and arnica. And I swear to God, it's gone down. I just put it on before the show. And that is why I pushed this product. It's 420. What better day to talk about Sunset Lake CBD? It is a farmer-owned company that ships craft CBD products directly from their farm to your door. Sunset Lake CBD has so many different products, something for everybody. They offer tinctures, gummies, salves, like the ones I just mentioned, coffee, dog biscuits, which I've yet to try. They are originally a dairy farm in Vermont. It was actually a Ben & Jerry's dairy farm, and they diversified and now are growing premium hemp. They support sustainable agriculture. And when you use their products, you are too. You're actually enhancing rural communities and supporting a company that believes in meaningful employment. Their minimum wage is $15 an hour. Maybe they should, we should send this ad to Kirsten Sinema and say, see, you can do it. They can make it. And the employees of Sunset Lake CBD own the majority of their company, and they support independent media like our show, the David Pakman Show, and of course, the Majority Report. And guess what? It is 420. And they have a sale. It started last week. It runs for 3 more days until April 23rd. You can use a coupon. The coupon code is 420, shocker, 420, the numbers, and you will get 30% off of your entire purchase for anything. Use 420 for 30% off of your entire purchase. You don't want to miss out. I got to do it because I want to get these dog biscuits for my dog. He finally got his cone off after 4 months, and we were trying to calm him down because he kept biting his tail nervously. And the poor dog been living, 5 dog years of his life have had this cone around his neck. So I'm hoping that these Sunset Lake dog biscuits, which are new. It's amazing. Go check them out. I'm going to do it. There's no artificial sweeteners or flavorings. I am neurotic about that for little Bijou because he has skin reactions to everything. And then he bites his tail raw and then has to wear a cone for 4 months. What about you, Dorsey? Any new CBD products that you're using on this 420? I feel like this is the day you got to lean in.
Yeah, I didn't know I was going to be on camera today. Otherwise, I'd be smoking my CBD right now.
I couldn't find it legally, so I had from where I am, so I had to use the self.
Yeah, actually, I got a nice little package from them the other day from Sunset Lake, and I didn't have to get any tincture because they sent me some tincture, and that's my favorite. They also sent some chocolates and reaffirming my partner's love for their CBD coffee. She was like, drinking it all day yesterday. I'm like, I know it's calming, but that's a lot of coffee. But
that's a lot of coffee.
It tastes that good. She's a total coffee snob too. She's making it with her Chemex thing, and
ooh,
yeah,
I gotta like come over and try that. Can I? Because I don't know how to make. I have all these machines, and nothing compares to like the cold brew that puts me on crack in the morning. But I only have to do one.
Oh so, yeah, she'll nerd out with you on the like the exact measurements and stuff. It's sometimes it's not exact, but it's a lot better than whatever it is, a Krups or something, a Mr. Coffee thing. It tastes great. Yeah, it's like pretty clean tasting. So anyway, yeah, she's back on the CBD coffee wagon now that we got that. But yeah, I love their products, and I love the fact that it's worker owned and. Sorry, I was doing some other work. I think they mentioned that, they just brought somebody on board.
Yeah, we talked about it last week. They have a new guy on that they just brought on. So we got to give a shout out to TJ, who's now part owner of the company. One more time, TJ, shout out, part owner of the company. Can you imagine if companies talked like this about like publicly traded companies talk like that about it's amazing. Guys, you don't have a lot of time. 3 days. Go put in 420 sunsetlakecbd.com. You get 30% off of your order. I'm running low on Solve. I need to use a lot more of it because I think I am actually having a reaction right now on camera to something. I don't know. Man, life. Always throwing you curveballs. All right, we will be right back with our guest to talk about the topic of the day, cannabis and other drugs. Hello, welcome back to the Nomiki Show. All right, it's 420. Just got to keep saying it over and over. We wanted to think of, it's not controversial anymore. So how do we discuss cannabis and legalization and like the next phase? And who better to have on than one of the key experts, best journalists when it comes to reporting on cannabis, Amanda Chicago Lewis. She's a reporter that reports mostly on cannabis and how it relates to policy, politics, science, economics, criminal justice, public health, and culture. She was a story producer and for a documentary about cannabis on MTV, and she's also written for Rolling Stone, The Verge, Wired, so many other places. Thank you for joining us, Amanda. We really appreciate your time. You're on mute.
Hey, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the kind words. Great to be here.
So I think what's really interesting is you reported on cannabis and some of the problems that are happening in California. California, of course, is a great model given that it's a huge marketplace. Also, simultaneously, there was so much in terms of targeting communities of color, really over the last 40, beyond that, but specifically related to criminal justice and of course targeting Black and Brown communities. I love that you're reporting on sort of the evolution. Like, what are the effects of legalizing now that it's been how many years since they've legalized marijuana in California?
Technically, we passed the recreational use law in 2016. It went into effect in 2018.
Went into effect, and then for medical, how long?
Medical technically passed in 1996, but
Ooh.
that legalized businesses. It really only legalized consumption and home growth. You had a doctor's recommendation.
Got it. Okay. So between whenever the word kind of got out that it's probably going to legalize, when did sort of the ecosystem, the infrastructure come into play? When did folks start hiring lobbyists? Did those things exist before, or is that something that came out of the growth in California? Now every state, in New York, for instance, they've been buying ads for years. There are lobbyist shops set up, pushing for legalization for a long time. And I personally know folks that have been planting the seeds for dispensaries for years. But because California was, I guess, technically so early, in some ways, did that infrastructure exist before legalization?
Sort of. It really depends on what you mean, because, there was activism going back many decades, and a push to really get legalization for adult use going in California began as early as 2009, 2010. But I think what you're maybe pointing to is this big shift that happened in 2015, 2016 from activists who were trying to end the drug war, activists who were really concerned with people's civil liberties and rights, wanting to sort of, keep people out of jail, keep people from the hassle of weed being illegal, and get really needed medicine to people who could use it, over to how do we make money off of this? People putting money into lobbyists to legalize primarily so they could profit off of it themselves. And then really a sort of sophisticated corporate government relations apparatus that really began in earnest around 2015. And after 2016 is kind of the only game in town. There is still a little bit of activism and philanthropy, but mostly it's this profit-driven thing now.
So, this is immediately, I think of John Boehner, who has been, on his publicity tour for the last several years, but really last few weeks. John Boehner, of course, the former Speaker of the House, Republican, who is against cannabis legalization forever, until, of course, he admittedly is now on the board of a company. But, this is very sophisticated, to recruit, and it's not a new strategy. This has been going on for every industry, is to get it's a revolving door of politics, right? This is very common. But in California right now, like, who are the big players? Like, how many monopolies are there, and comparatively to some more, smaller dispensaries?
It's really complicated, right? So California, I think, is actually a better place for small businesses than some other states. Nationally, cannabis is increasingly dominated by what are known as MSOs, or multi-state operators. In many states, there are caps on the number of licenses that can be given out that allow you to legally sell, grow, transport cannabis. So these licenses are really difficult to get. They cost a lot of money. There's a lot of startup capital that you need to get it going, to build out, for example, like, because it's federally illegal, you can't move cannabis from state to state. So you need separate operations in each place, which is really not very efficient. And then there are many states with legal weed where they don't really have the right climate to grow outdoors. So you're building out this like enormous energy consuming, wasteful warehouse to grow the cannabis. And then it costs all this money to get it running, and a lot of effort and expertise to do it well. And there's more variability than you might think in terms of how many plants there are and how much cannabis actually comes out of that, because it's actually a very difficult crop to grow. So I guess what I'm saying is, we're seeing more, I wouldn't even necessarily use the word monopolies, but we're seeing oligopolies that the governments have created in most states. California is actually a little more open, but it's very competitive, particularly because legal operators are competing with the illicit market, which is particularly strong in California. But the illicit market is also strong in many other states that have legal cannabis. Really, the best rate anyone has is Colorado, and they're at about a 30 to 35% illicit market. And so that's our best case scenario in terms of, it's federally illegal, but it's legal on the state level, which creates huge complications, really big problems. And then I guess the other thing is, like, once there is federal legalization, then we'll really see consolidation. Then we'll really see only a couple of operators take over. I saw a study several years ago that said all of the cannabis consumed in the United States could feasibly be produced by 6 mega farms. 6. It's
Wow.
very
Wow.
crazy.
And then Monsanto will jump in. Okay, so let's talk about these illegal. Is it just dispensaries? Is it people that are growing as well? So that's everything. Okay, so does a dispensary? Let's look at the supply chain. So you have farms, right? And do they have their own dispensaries, or do they sell to specific dispensaries? Like, how does the supply chain work in California, for instance?
In California, it could work in any number of ways. You could be vertically integrated and have a farm. And then, depending on the size and depending on what county you're in, be funneling that toward a dispensary. Also, there are rules trying to limit how many businesses or how big a business can get, but those rules are pretty easy to get around. And most people in weed are used to getting around rules because they were operating illegally for a long time, and they're continuing to operate illegally on a federal level. And so it's all about loopholes. And so it's like, what's legal? And like, then there's like, what people are actually doing. And so, yeah, it's very variable. And like, the truth is that like most legal businesses in California have like a sideline of, illicit cannabis, because like the profit margins are so much bigger. And, it's just so easy because like we don't have checkpoints on state lines. And so like sending cannabis out of state is a particularly, lucrative and simple thing to do.
What does that mean when you say sending cannabis out of state? Meaning people who come in for cannabis tourism and then take it back home, or literally sending it out of state?
Literally sending it out of state. So say you're a farm, say you're a transporter, say you're a distributor, say you're a edibles manufacturer. I've heard lots about, they have a farm and like all the plants on the outside of the farm are tagged the way that they're supposed to be tagged to be legal, but they're concealing at the middle of the farm the plants that are not tagged, which can be grown at like a much higher profit margin when they're sold on the illicit market, because they aren't being taxed, they aren't being regulated in the same way, they don't have to meet the same standards. Maybe they're using like pesticides they're not supposed to be using that like make it easier to grow. And then, we're talking about like you send it to a state where there's no legal weed, maybe you get $3,000, $2,000, $2,500 for a pound. Versus in state, you might only get $1,000 to $1,500 for a pound.
Oh, okay. So it's literally double. Got it.
It's very variable on prices, right. And it fluctuates, and it's like, but like, yeah, there's a huge difference. And that's just like the price of the pound, not even talking about like, the taxes you have to pay, the regulatory build out. Right. And the pesticide thing is very real because like, right. Cannabis in California that's legal is held to a very high standard, and you also have to pay for it to get tested. And then there are these pesticides that like make it really easy to not get powdery mildew. So say you get powdery mildew on like a whole tent of stuff, and then you're like, well, there's no way to remediate this. And like, am I going to lose all the money that I put into growing this? I'm going to just throw the chemical on it that will make this go away and then send it to the illicit market. Because otherwise, like, it's People think you're going to make all this money on legal weed. That is a myth. That is not real. That is not a thing. The profits in weed are in the illicit market. So if you have, all this, legal weed, you're probably actually not making very much money on it. You want to have a sideline where you make the actual money in the illicit market.
My brain is blown right now. This is insane. Okay, so the majority of shops in Los Angeles, for instance, are illegal shops, right?
Yes. That's, that
do
is
people know that?
Los Angeles. That is like a very specific LA, Southern California situation, but yes.
Do people know that? Like when they go in and purchase? No, there's no like license. Are people looking for some sort of like seal of legal sale?
I mean, those things exist. Those things exist, but like nobody knows to look for that. And that's, so this is like, cannabis is an extremely local issue, but also it plays out in similar ways in similar places, depending on different factors. But California has been the sort of what not to do on cannabis example for over 20 years. Like literally Obama's Justice Department, their memo about like how legal cannabis could work in the states was written with like a side eye toward California. Like when Colorado and Washington first legalized adult use, it was sort of like, okay, this can work, just like don't do it the way that California did it with like no rules and the businesses aren't really legal, but they're just operating and everyone assumes that they're legal. So in LA, no dispensaries were legal until 2018. But between like 2006 and 2018, there were between 1,000 and 2,000 dispensaries at any given moment in LA. So I've lived in LA since 2009. And before I, covered cannabis professionally, I had no idea that all these shops were actually not legal because there are so many of them and they check your driver's license and like, you have to sign something to go in and you're like, oh yeah, this is legal because medical weed is legal here and I have my doctor's recommendation and I'm like buying the weed and walking out and like everything's fine. But no, none of those shops were supposed to be there. And
just to be clear, these are the shops under the medical marijuana law, not the recent one. They still were illegal shops.
The reason why there are illegal shops now is because there was a decade plus where medical shops were not actually legal, but everyone assumed they were legal. So their existence became entrenched. And then when a small number of those shops became technically legal on a state level, people really didn't notice or understand or care, other than you don't need to get the doctor's recommendation anymore. All the other shops started saying, okay, yeah, like just give us your driver's license. We're legal now too. And like people had no idea.
So what are the downsides of these illegal shops? I mean, they seem to be primarily in Black and brown communities, right? So that's a good thing.
Right.
No?
So why is that, right? There's this huge stretch of South Los Angeles where there are 0 legal shops. That's because the shops that are legal have been grandfathered from, they had to have their name on a list in 2007. Then they had to survive from 2007 to 2018. Where do you think it was possible for people to be taking these legal risks and survive and still sell weed?
During the economic downturn, let's just remind folks.
Not just during the economic downturn, but like surviving waves of, police raids. Like who has the extra capital and who is not getting harassed by the police quite as much? I mean, like, in the white neighborhoods, there were other issues where, neighborhood councils were being NIMBYs and said, like, we don't want this here. And like everywhere has their own little thing. But certainly the reason why there are 0 legal shops in South LA has to do with the like ridiculous, unfair, and like obscure way that LA decided who even got to be legal, which a judge like a decade ago was like, this is not fair. And then like we did it anyway in 2018. So, so there are no legal shops in South Los Angeles, which is predominantly Black and brown neighborhoods. And what are the consequences? I mean, like you have to go to an illicit shop. And listen, like I don't want to. It's not like there was sort of like everyone was an activist, and it was like fine to commit civil disobedience until there was a clear distinction between who was legal and who was not legal. So like I'm not going to shade anyone for like operating a weed business that's like not technically licensed, because I don't really think that's fair. But for a consumer, if you go to a shop like that, it might have something gross on the product, like some kind of weird pesticide that might be like messing with your hormones or in some way like killing your brain cells. Also, you know, like the vape crisis, like that was illicit vapes. Like you could get that at an illicit shop. Like I talked to people who went to illicit shops unknowingly in Los Angeles and got sick from vape pens. Like that's a thing. That's what happens. Then on like the people who work there are people who work there who don't even know that they're breaking the law. And then they could end up with a misdemeanor. They could end up, I mean, there was a boy in South LA who got killed and like got caught up in some gang violence because he like didn't understand that he was working at an illicit shop, allegedly, according to his mother.
I want to touch on the war on drugs, because the argument is, of course, this is going to, the more we legalize cannabis and other drugs, it's going to potentially create more stabilization in the global South. Is there any evidence of that whatsoever at this point?
I mean, look, if you mean like cannabis coming from the cartels in Mexico, we've already had a huge shift away from that in the last 20 years. Like the domestic cannabis production is really what supplies the country. We're really not dealing with that much cartel cannabis anymore in the United States, largely because of the loosening of laws in California starting in 1996, where there was, a gray area and you could sort of wiggle in that gray area, but not that you were fully legal. And so, you know, an enormous amount of the cannabis that's consumed in the United States is produced in California. But like, you know, I think you, in the beginning, you were like, oh yeah, cannabis is like no longer controversial. I think the idea that cannabis is like not terrible for you and like maybe should be legal and should be acceptable, that's a lot less controversial than it was 20, 25 years ago. However, like cannabis policy is incredibly controversial when you really get into it because it's really complicated.
So with that being said, and this is a layer that I haven't really thought of, and I'm glad you brought it up. If it were, if the federal government, if Joe Biden were to swipe his pen, you know, just at the signing it into law, you mentioned there might be like a few monopolies that basically take over the entire industry. Is there some sort of in-between ground where you can keep the small businesses, make sure, are there any proposals to make sure that small businesses are protected? We get the illicit drugs off the market so you're not, you know, people aren't having reactions and dying and all of the things that you mentioned there are the safety issues as well as so many other issues. So that there's a pathway for small business owners to take part in this marketplace and not the Monsantos or whoever to eat it up by having it federally legalized.
All right, so like counterintuitively, keeping it illegal on the federal level is actually better for small businesses because as soon as it's federally legal, all these enormous players are going to jump in. Altria, formerly known as Philip Morris, right? They put over $1 billion into a cannabis business in Canada because it's federally legal in Canada. And as soon as this banking stuff opens, we're just going to see this like flood of major international corporations in the cannabis industry. So many cannabis business owners are actually hoping that federal legalization is delayed so that they don't have to compete with those folks. There's also this sense that like, so like so many things about cannabis like sound like conspiracy theories, but now that I've spent, you know, gosh, like 7 or 8 years very deep in this, I'm like, oh, this is what's true. But so I'm going to say this, I know it sounds crazy. The federal government is actually making more money from the IRS tax revenue on keeping cannabis federally illegal, but having the state legal programs. So if they legalize federally, that would be like at a loss. And so they're going to want to make up that money. So there's going to be this like probably pretty high federal excise tax to make that money. I can explain why they're making more money off it being federally illegal. Basically, you can't take business tax deductions if you're breaking federal law. So all these cannabis businesses are paying, and this is part of why it's actually not lucrative to have a legal weed business unless you're operating at enormous scale. You can't take business tax deductions, so you're paying an enormous tax rate, right? And so the IRS is making all that money. Okay, so then the feds legalize, right? They're going to add some kind of like 10% excise tax to be like made whole on like what they're losing from the like state legal, federally illegal businesses that are paying them this huge tax rate. The higher the tax rate, the harder it's going to be to quash the illicit market. So you actually don't want to have a super high tax rate on legal cannabis. That's like not great policy if you want to have people switch to the legal market. We're certainly seeing that in California. I've been hearing a lot of conversations about new ballot initiatives in various places and maybe statewide to lower the tax revenue, the tax rates that were established a couple of years ago, because it's helping the illicit market survive. And so that raises all these other questions, like, what are we doing?
What are we doing? And then, like, obviously there's the criminal justice aspect of this. I mean, there's the criminal justice asking to decriminalize marijuana. I mean, I think that people are trying to attack the loopholes in different ways, but nobody discusses legalizing cannabis in any sense similar to this conversation on the federal level, like during the presidential debates, for instance. It just seems like a
complicated. It's really too complicated and people don't understand it, but criminal justice, it's still the most common reason for arrest in America. It's not a major driver of mass incarceration. That's kind of a myth. There are very few people who are, locked up for long periods just for cannabis. I mean, there are some people and we should like help them get out, but really it's this like economic financial burden on the like 750,000 people who are arrested every year for cannabis, fees, lawyers, probation, fines. It's not like really getting people locked up for long periods, but it's like just siphoning money from the like poor people, Black people, and brown people of America.
And it might have been their first, second, third offense, or they may have been held, as you said, without bail, able to pay the bail. And of course, that leads to so many other complicated issues every step of the way. Super interesting conversation. We might extend our 420 coverage and talk about this a little bit more. I would love to have you back on, Amanda Chicago Lewis. Go check out her article. Her article is out right now on specifically this Los Angeles, what's going on in Los Angeles right now. It's in Politico magazine. If you go check out Politico magazine, it's the Half Legal Cannabis Trap. Super fascinating conversation. Really appreciate your time and happy 420. I'm sure you've got the whole circuit. You're like on the 420 circuit today.
It's exhausting day every year, but yeah, happy to come on. It's complicated, it's confusing, it's not easy to understand, but I appreciate you putting time toward it.
I appreciate you doing the work. We're just asking the questions.
Of course.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you.
And special shout out, we've got Kenzo Shibata in our YouTube chat right now. Thanks, Kenzo. I just got that notification. And everybody else, we are going to take questions at the end of the show, all of our super chats on Twitch and on YouTube. Thank you all for jumping in there. All right, we're going to go to a quick break and come back with our panel. We've got Napoleon the Legend and Ben Dixon here.
You decided to throw your weight behind the legalizing of cannabis industry. Do you think that the federal government needs to pass a law that would basically take that off of the drug list so that it could be more in line with what's happening in the states?
Yeah, we've got now some 37, 38 states who've legalized cannabis in some form. The federal government says it's illegal. It's time for the federal government to look at these 37, 38 states, a vast majority of them, who've legalized this, and take some action to basically get out of the way.
I'm still a just say no kid. So I've watched this debate and your embrace of it with a little bit of skepticism. How am I wrong?
Well, I won't say I embrace it, but when you're in politics as long as I do, you learn to listen to your constituents. And over the years, I was in Congress and I saw state after state after state begin to legalize cannabis. I began to take notice because obviously the people were speaking. And by the time I left office, I thought to myself, listen, I'd rather have a glass of wine and smoke a cigarette But if somebody wants to smoke a joint, what do I really care? But once I got to look into some of the research about the benefits of cannabis for kids with seizures, for soldiers that have chronic pain or PTSD, I began to believe there's a place for this product in American society. And I don't go out and promote it, but I do I serve on the board of a cannabis company. I believe in what the industry is doing. And the American people want to smoke a joint, let them do it.
Hey, well, you mentioned wine.
We need a supercut.
The Nomiki Show. Yeah. We clash momentarily.
We need a supercut of him being like, if Americans want to smoke a joint, I'm all for it. Let's do. I'm sure you are. I am sure you are. All right. Without further ado, the host of the Benjamin Dixon Show is here, Ben Dixon.
Hey, what's going on?
Yes. And of course, Napoleon the Legend is here, Afrobeat hip hop artist. That song, did you hear that? Did you hear that?
Yeah.
That's a new song.
Oh, that's
Napoleon
dope.
sent me. Pretty
Oh,
amazing,
no, that was
right?
fire. Yeah, no, I was in the zone with it. All right, let's do it.
I sent him.
All for Nomiki. All for Nomiki.
Oh,
We asked for it on the show. I like put him, made him a little uncomfortable. I was like, "Can you do one for us?"
it's amazing.
You put me on the spot, but I had to come through, you know?
And I sent you a voice memo. I was listening to it, and I had someone in the room who works with me, and she didn't know what I was doing, and she's like, "Yo, that's a really good song." She's like, "Who's?" And then she heard my name. She's like, "I'm so confused. What's going on? What are you listening to?" All right, guys. Happy 420. We are gonna talk about. I mean, my mind was just blown with our last interview. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to it live, but we had on a cannabis reporter who just came out with a story on the California, like what's going wrong in California, and she basically blew my mind, saying it'd be bad for small businesses, bad for Black and Brown communities if we federally legalized marijuana. It'd also be bad for tax revenue. Anytime John Boehner says something and he's for it, I'm like, I don't know if I buy this. But 2/3 of Americans now support the legalization of marijuana. Ben, you got some feelings. I can feel the feels.
No, no, happy 420 to everybody. It's just, I'm just thinking about the fact that John Boehner is able to be on Fox News and make this grand gesture, this grand statement of, hello, America, it's okay for you to get high now, right? And to me, it's like, this is something that so many generations have been trying to tell this country, right? And it took all of these years to get to this place. And it took all those arrests. It took all those people going to jail, all the people getting killed or unnecessarily so. All those things it took for them to now finally say, And what made them finally say, is the fact that they can make money. John Boehner is in position to get so much money off of marijuana. So, of course, he needs America to be okay with it.
I mean, Napoleon, he basically said it out loud. He's like, yeah, I'm on the board. I don't even smoke weed. I just like my wine and my cigar. Yeah, we know John Boehner. Like, that was your reputation, tanning beds, smoking cigars and drinking wine. But like, I would have thought that Capitol would have jumped on this a little bit earlier. So, Napoleon, you have a firm understanding of foreign policy. Was this like as the global South became, they started like making less money in the global South, funding armies and revolutions and overthrowing socialist governments and putting in dictators. As that business enterprise started to go down, were they like, okay, now we can make the money on the weed? Is that kind of the intersection?
It's all about the money all the time. And, we're in America anyway, so it has to make sense on that. So I'm not surprised that they found a way to benefit from it, which is always, you think they'll do it for the right reasons, but they're not even doing it for the right reasons. I'm just happy because, it needs to be done anyways. It's like, just the hypocrisy behind those rules anyways, and the racial undertone behind the laws with drugs and everything like that are ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? But that's like that Puritanesque style, philosophy of like, we have the moral high ground. But now, as you see, Boehner going on Fox and, as like, the conservative so-called channel talking about it's cool to get high. It's just an about face, but it's so American at the same time. And it's like, what Amanda was saying earlier, but it's always what happens in America. Like even when they do the right thing, we're not going to be the ones, the black and brown people are not going to be the ones benefiting from whatever policies they're going to put, even if it's the right thing to do, you know, as a whole, we're always going to get the short end of the stick. So it's like the whole system is messed up anyways, you know, regardless of what.
You know, I want to quickly show Schumer's response to this too, because the politics of this are so funny right now. When you have the former Speaker of the House who's Republican for it, you have Joe Biden firing potentials or not hiring staffers who admitted, because they're like, what, to smoking pot, and that of course is if Joe Biden were to be acknowledgement of federally of potentially legalizing marijuana. But I want to show Schumer, Speaker, leader of the Senate right now. Let's see what his response is.
Today is what you might call a very unofficial American holiday, 420. It's as appropriate a time as any to take a hard look at our laws that have over-criminalized the use of marijuana and put it on a par with heroin, LSD, and other narcotics that bear little or no resemblance in their effects either on individuals or on society more broadly. The war on drugs has too often been a war on people, particularly people of color.
He's so nervous. He's just like,
For decades,
am I allowed to say this?
Young men and women, disproportionately young men and women of color, have been arrested and jailed for even carrying a small amount of marijuana, a charge that often came with exorbitant penalties and a serious criminal record from which they might never recover, being rejected from job after job because this serious criminal record was on, because this minor deviation from the law was listed as a serious criminal record. Makes no sense. It's time for change.
Wow.
If only there could have been a senator from a state like New York or California or somewhere, some Democrat who lived in a state where there were real criminal justice issues that could have seen this study that he just cited, I don't know, when it came out 25 years ago.
I was just thinking how long it takes for the word from down here in the streets to get into our temples, right? Like we've known this for years, but the opposite side of the coin is that they're not just ignorant. Strike that note. They're not ignorant at all. They knew that when we knew that, but they had investments in the prison industrial complex. They had investments in making sure that they continued criminalizing this drug to the point that they can fill those for-profit private prisons cells, that even if the beds are empty, the state, the government has to pay. And so they knew that, but they had to milk life for as much as they possibly could for as long as they could.
Napoleon, I mean, this is ultimately it. It's the criminal justice era of the 90s when these guys came up, and Kamala Harris, who's just, another iteration of it. But what is it about right this second that is it just because New York legalized marijuana because Cuomo was pushed to do so and New York's more progressive at the base? Well, what do you think?
I mean, it's not like I'm going to start trusting Schumer. Right. He obviously is just thinking strategically for his own career, where he feels like the winds are going that way, that direction. He's trying to be a little more left, seem a little bit more cool somehow by pushing for these things. He's trying to gain some popularity. And because to me, he's always going to be one of those big donor Democrats or whatever. But I think it's just a survival thing for him. And and at the same time, like I said, it has to be done anyways, because there's some people legally who had problems with that, who need to have their record expunged. I remember being in Brooklyn and Brownsville, if you get pulled over and you have a little roach, a little joint, they'll put you through the system with something where they could just tell you to go home or whatever. It's the time, the money, the hassle. If you already have a warrant or if something like that, you could get in such trouble for something that's now seemingly about to be legal. So.
And that's why it's important to pay attention to these. Just as a side note, this is New York City. That was legal under Michael Bloomberg. That was legal. All these Democrats are like, oh, there's no difference between de Blasio is a bad mayor. Let's just be clear. Yes, de Blasio has made some major mistakes. He is owned by the police union, as every single mayor in America is, and as every single mayor in history has been. But let's just be very clear. De Blasio ended that policy, and that change transformed communities. Did he go all the way? No. No. But it has absolutely transformed communities because it was a ridiculous stop and frisk, broken windows policies. Are you effing kidding me? The fact that was in New York with New York lawmakers, who are supposedly progressive. Come on. That's why that matters. That's why you don't elect Andrew Yang.
Yeah.
Side note.
I mean, they have to feed the machine somehow, right? This monster has to be, they grind us into pulp so that we can feed all the different parts of the monster. Like you're talking about, brother, like they need all those mechanisms to be kicked into gear. The fact that now you got to get an attorney. Now you got to go through the system. Now you got to go through this clothing line actually is dependent on you being in that system. So of course they would take their time legalizing something that we knew generations ago was okay.
And it was okay to put all this music out, to do all these movies about weed and do all this and promote weed to like the youth culture while it was not legal. And why are the laws following like 10, 20 years later? It just it's just ridiculous, so hypocritical, but we're used to it.
That's right. So I want to shift just a teeny bit because while Senator Schumer, who is the Wall Street senator, as we all know, there is a House bill involving cannabis banking. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. Cannabis banking, this bill has been approved. Crazy. So this is how quickly things are shifting. Let's move that thing down a little bit more so I can read it on screen for everybody who's on the podcast. So the U.S. House of Representatives on Monday passed legislation that would allow banks to provide services to cannabis companies in states where it's legal, a step towards removing what analysts say is a barrier to development of a national industry. So just to be clear for folks who've never purchased marijuana, cannabis at a dispensary, you got to buy it in cash. You got to pay in cash because it's not federally legal. So somehow they were able, this hasn't passed yet in the Senate. I'm very curious who's going to block this bill from passing. And frankly, I'm curious even if it does pass in the Senate, if Joe Biden will sign it into law, because it's essentially a federal acknowledgement of, that's the whole, like, they kind of look the other way thing with the states. But it's still an issue. So, is this just going to incentivize monopolies more, Ben?
Absolutely. Absolutely. They're buying themselves time, right? To your point, there's time now for all of the big tobacco companies to get in position and to get in line, but they're already in position. It's now time for them to execute. Don't think that they're going to let this market come in and actually be something that democratizes the effects and the benefits of marijuana. Absolutely not.
Napoleon, what are your thoughts?
No, I agree. It's time to make this money, and it's time to tell the big players that, that the floodgates are about to be open and it's time to eat, and it's things like that need to be done with some sort of like fairness, like to level the playing field. And that's what I mean. It's not going to happen. It's just those big companies are going to benefit, and the smaller suppliers are going to be, you're probably going to have to still do it illegally. I don't know.
I just wanted to know real quick. I'm sorry, guys, for shortening this, but the Derek Chauvin trial, of course, they've been deliberating, the jury. They have just reached a verdict. We don't know the response yet. We're just waiting to see. And we may not have, I don't know how quickly they're going to come back with that, with the verdict.
I think they're coming up at 4:30 is
4:30.
What we had on our side. Yeah.
You got on your side. See, Ben's got his own production crew there. Everyone's, but let's just, can we touch on that for a second? Because this has been a very passionate, the country is on the edge of their seats. And yesterday, I kind of want to touch on this one aspect because first thing, it just effing pissed me off. But in light of the largest uprising, right, the largest reaction, rightfully so, to the George Floyd death and Breonna Taylor death and so many others, it was a culmination of everything, movements working hard over the summer. You also had this response from partially so response from the racists of this country in storming the Capitol, feeling insecure, feeling like they have the right to push back, and wreak destruction on this country. Yesterday, Kevin McCarthy called for Nancy Pelosi to censure Maxine Waters, who was discussing the Chauvin trial, and I think she has every right to speak freely. Her community is being boarded up right now in anticipation of potential riots if they do not reach the proper verdict. And so many other communities are as well. I think that's where it was coming from. But I'd love to get your reactions to how this country is anticipating the verdict, Ben.
They're preparing for. This is the way we used to prepare for a hurricane that was coming to South Florida. We saw it coming, right? We've taken the chance, are we going to board up or not? So most of the time you did, and then you know what's coming. And you just batten down the hatches and you ride out. They know that a storm is coming and they're preparing for it. And I guess, the real question is if he's found guilty, the real question is are the reactionaries over there, are they going to respond? Because they're vested in this just as much as we are. As much as we're fighting for justice, they're fighting for an injustice. And the question is, are they going to rise up if they don't get the verdict that they want? I doubt it, though.
What do you think, Napoleon? Do you think that they're going to take down those the boarded up banks and H&Ms and Targets when the off-duty police officers take to the streets?
I mean, the whole world is watching, and it's like the type of things where I want to hope for the best, but it's like I'm kind of pessimistic about it because I don't want to have any expectations when it comes to what's going to happen, because ultimately this is a verdict kind of on white supremacy and also on policing as a whole, and we've seen and it's also it's on our society, like it becomes a fight against protest or against people who are going against injustice. Like Maxine Waters just showing solidarity for a certain cause she believes in, and she's being centered into the debate when the problem is somebody got killed. A man who shouldn't have been killed, probably arrested at the very least if he did something wrong, and it's really it's really a problem of policing, you know what I mean? And I've heard that the prosecutor said they're trying to individualize it to Chauvin when it's actually it's such a big problem, and it's a problem also in Minnesota and the whole nation,
So I guess say he's convicted, right? Or not convicted. Actually, let's just say either way. What do you think? Are there going to be reforms that come out of this? Is there going to be vast, and I don't say reform in a incremental approach. I mean, is there going to be change that happens on our side? Because we're already seeing it on the right. They've introduced, because they have such a command of our legislatures, because the Democrats are asleep at the effing wheel. But they've already introduced hundreds of bills across the country, not just for voter suppression, but got this crazy anti-riot bill where a couple can be a mob and a throuple can be can be a riot. Sorry. I mean, it doesn't seem like we're prepared. Yeah, we've got movements, we've got organizations out there who have policy papers thousands of pages long, and yet they've got a command of the legislature. They've got ALEC down in these legislatures, ready to just completely circumnavigate any sort of personal freedoms, as they like to say. What do you guys think?
I'm fascinated. I'm just, it takes so much to get so little justice in this country. It's just, this is almost like the system is having to sacrifice one of its own in order to preserve itself. And it will do it. The only practical decision here is for this man to be found guilty. And I'm not talking about just in that courtroom. I'm talking about in the court of public opinion, right? Y'all got to give us one. Out of all the stuff that they've seen and they've ignored, y'all gonna try to take this one from us? See, I'm just so amazed at how much it takes for us to get so little justice.
Great. That's really it. That's it.
And I think also it might come with more like anti-protest type bills, because if they so-called give us that one, they're probably going to take that away. They're like, look, we're willing to take a step, but you guys can't scream too loud about it. You guys can't. It's always a give and take, where it's like they're gonna repress our voices one way or the other, and we're supposed to be happy if he's found guilty. They expect us to be like celebrating, where actually, it's like the damage has been done historically over and over again. It's nothing. It's the right thing to do, but it's still nothing. If you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, of course. It's like when a family, whose family member has been murdered, and the verdict comes in and they decide, it's the same exact thing. It's just on a much larger level. They're still mourning. People are still mourning. The family's mourning. This is, the country is mourning. Well, at least part of the country is mourning. It's really, I think we're all on the edge of our seats. But as Ben said, this is how they do business. They see every crisis as an opportunity, and it's literally how they do business, at the expense of lives in this country. It's how we've built this country. I don't need to tell you guys that. But what I will say is thank you for joining us. As always, 420. Ben Dixon, go check out the Benjamin Dixon Show. What else are you pushing out there? I know you've got your morning
like it
show.
Or not, the morning show, Like It or Not, same channel, same time, 8:30 in the morning.
8:30 in the morning, because you got kids.
Yes, and I'm
People
surprised
with
they're
kids
not out
get
here
up
yet.
early.
I'm waiting for them to come running out now.
People with kids get up early. People like me get up early for things like brunch and yoga. I'm lying. I actually get up early. Pulling to Legend. What are you promoting right now? Tell us what's out.
I have a song out. I adapted from a French rapper called Akhenaton. He asked me to adapt his song called The End of Their World. It's a 19-minute song. I never did anything like that. Wow. There's a video, so check it out. We're talking about the world, different perspectives. And I have The Hole in My Heart Part 2 coming out next week. So
good. So where can we find both these things? iTunes? Yeah. Where else?
Everywhere. Spotify, iTunes, YouTube. However you get it, just get it. Doesn't matter.
Get it. Thank you guys. Always appreciate you. Happy 420.
Happy 420. Take care.
Take care. Peace. All right, to everybody else, let's go through some of our chats. I don't know how many we have in here. What I do know is Kenzo Shibata was in the chat, so thank you, Kenzo, one more time. Verbin Weaver, Chauvin verdict reached. Are we going to air it? Wait around. We might. I think if Dorsey, can we just continue to air it afterwards? Yes. Okay. We're just going to play it so you guys can watch it. Because I don't know how long it's going to go on. Kowalski from Nebraska sends his love. Thank you, Kowalski. Ian Kinsel, I meant to send this last week, but when you were on vacation, Sam said your name correctly once on the air. I was so proud of him. How did I miss that? My God. It's like he's learning his lessons. Literally lessons. Joe Blundell says it also happens to be the most easily growable source of protein on the planet. Hemp seed, without question, is the most nutritious food source on earth. That's very hard to say. Cannabis is illegal for so many reasons. So it's funny you mentioned that, because I have a funny story about, I mentioned the platform committee twice today. The 2016 platform committee, one of the craziest, most controversial topics. And maybe I'll have some like platform committee members come on one day and we'll just do a revival. We'll remember the best moments of that meeting. There was a legalized cannabis provision, and it wasn't, hemp, excuse me. I just messed up the entire joke. It wasn't cannabis, it was hemp. And they lobbied the anti-hemp provision as if they were lobbying against Medicare for all, or like eliminating acknowledgement that, eliminating lobbyists from the Democratic Party. They were so aggressive about the hemp. It was crazy. And none of us could really understand it. And to this day, I don't understand it. I don't think it was like, because it's an acknowledgement that cannabis should be legalized, because I think that even the establishment split on that, as we're seeing right now. It was insane how aggressive they were. And the advocates for hemp, when I first watched their speeches, I was like, wow, they're really passionate about hemp. They're like, the Constitution was signed with hemp, or the Declaration of Independence was signed with hemp. It was on hemp. It was amazingly passionate. So if you ever have a chance to go back and watch the 2016 platform committee meetings, the major ones that were in Orlando, Florida in July, beginning of July, go check out the hemp debate. That one was hilarious. All right, folks, that were in the live chats. Thank you. Shout out to MIDI Doctors Mario and everyone who's been working those algorithms. And of course, our YouTube moderators, as always, Choke and Bubsy, the Orb and Chuck Diesel. Oh, the trolls were out today. I am shocked by that. Could have anything to do with the fact that I've been challenging Andrew Yang. Could have anything to do with the fact that we have been challenging cryptocurrency. And oh, whoops, we were on MR today talking about failed strategies by Delay the left folks. Come on. That's where we know where they're coming from. They're all generated. It's a little community. They like talk to each other and then they go blast them. Go say misogynist things on YouTube. Wow, you sure are strong. I hope you guys are doing well, man. All right, go take a walk. That's what I say. Anytime I want to like do something negative to somebody else, I say, you know what? That time is better served towards me. I'm going to go take a walk. There are those who externalize their pain and those who internalize your pain. I try to internalize it by eating. Can't you just do what everybody else does and just eat some chocolate? All right. Huge thank you also to Dorian Sapiens, A Difficult Truth, Nug Wrangler, and our means on Twitch for keeping the chat rooms troll free. Where's Harvey K? Was he here? What's going on with Harvey K? Harvey texted me on the show, I think. I got to catch up with him. If you're watching, Harvey, I will text you back. It's been a whirlwind couple of days. For those who watch, you know that I was traveling for Matriarch in Miami. And now I'm working on a little project to be discussed later. Schultzy 100, thank you for your excellent program. Have enjoyed it immensely. I am so appreciative. Well, make sure to share our program with your friends, your family, your sisters, your brothers, your neighbors, everybody, because that's how you get the word out. We are fighting those algorithms, not just with the trolls and the likes and all the things that they do, but, you know, to share it with folks if you can. And we're on social media, as you guys know as well. All right, everybody, stay in solidarity. We will see you tomorrow on Wednesday, 3 p.m., same time, same place, 3 p.m. Eastern. Take care.
The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. Yeah, We clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed. Everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki